Hi, so I'm here in Trinity with Stuart McIntosh from Cyrus, and we're here to discuss sustainability in FM and what that really looks like. And Stuart, do you want to take me through, I suppose, the partnership with Trinity here, how that's come to fruition, and what's the driver and what's the benefit of the equipment we're after seeing?
We've started now over the last 2 years on a heavy program of capital life cycle replacement on chilled water plant for the university here. We have a maintenance contract here for a number of years, and we've been able to identify a number of end-of-life old screw chillers, and we've now looked to replace those with very high efficiency oil-free magnetic bearing chillers, which are the most efficient on the market. The university is obviously very, very keen where we do these life cycle programs to avail of the most efficient and sustainable products on the market, and where we've I suppose brought our expertise to bear is looking at the whole life cost and impact of the units that we replace here.
You're actually value engineering the solution to make sure it's sustainable. And what benefits does it bring? Is it carbon? Is it energy? Is it transport? Talk me through that benefit.
We look at that from a number of different angles. I mean, clearly there's a base capital cost for the machine itself, but what we've tried to do is identify products that will actually give us a benefit right from manufacturing through to the service position. So there's obviously cost savings from energy usage as well, and in this particular location, the replacement of about 1 megawatt cooling here has accrued to approximately €12,000 a month in just pure cost reduction. That's a massive energy reduction as well. But the units that we recommend, they all use non-ozone depleting gases. They have a smaller footprint, they have smaller components, and they are lighter in mass, which means the manufacturing process has less impact. The transport of those machines has less impact. The installation is easier, and we also connect those using IoT technology, both to the BMS on site and remote access for that, but we can also enable remote access to the manufacturer at the factory as well, to enable one, a quicker response and fix, but two, we haven't got the impact of having to bring engineers to site or to that location specifically until we know there's a problem that requires their attention.
What are the challenges you're still seeing out there from people going on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when we're working and talking to other potential customers or existing customers, the hardest thing for us is getting the baseline data and actually gathering that data to enable the correct targeting of spend for the maximum impact in cost, efficiency and carbon reduction.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on sustainability in FM. So I'm here with a fantastic group of industry experts today, and I suppose what we're looking at is how does sustainability in FM play a part going forward? We've always had an industry that was hard services, soft services focused, and now I suppose after COVID we're coming back, and all of the issues that were there prior to COVID and the pandemic are now coming back, but sustainability has really jumped up on that. The one advantage is that FM has been able to get a seat at the senior table in the last through the business continuity planning, the crisis management. All of the FM managers have access now to senior leadership, and now senior leadership in organizations, they're trying to look at what do we do in terms of sustainability. And I feel there's an opportunity there for FM to really step in and take some ownership and responsibility. We're probably the biggest influencers, especially in the built environment and the office environment. So it's really an onus on us now to step up and take ownership. So we're going to have a robust conversation today. I'd like to introduce you to the panel. So we've got 4 speakers here with us. Kieran MacDonald from Knight Frank. So Kieran's exceptional experience and real, practitioner on the ground in delivering sustainability in the built environments. Dennis Egan is the owner of Western Facility Services. So Dennis again has been, in the forefront of actually working with clients on the ground, trying to understand their needs and to deliver that service as an FM service provider. Stuart McIntosh is General Manager of Cyrus. So Stuart has really, again, huge experience within the FM industry, but particularly now in terms of delivering technical solutions on the ground and what that looks like. And Dermot Walsh joined us from Irish Water. So Dermot, again, has a responsibility for energy and support systems and understanding how to implement sustainability from a client perspective. So we've got that balance between FM service provider and also a client organization. So guys, welcome. It's great to have you here today. Looking forward to having a really good conversation on sustainability. So what I'd like to do is, maybe before we get into some of the nuts and bolts, I'd like for each of you maybe to just give me your understanding of what does sustainability in FM mean for you and your organization, and within that, I suppose, what are some of the challenges you're seeing. So Jeremy, you're the client, so we're going to go to you first. You're the one that pays all the bills. So could you give me an outline, I suppose, from your perspective of what's sustainability for Irish Water within your estate, and I suppose what are the challenges you're seeing within that?
Yeah, absolutely. So from an Irish Water perspective, your overall organisation is, to treat and wastewater and to provide quality drinking water to all our customers throughout Ireland. Inside in the facility space, we're very much there to support that effort. So, supporting the buildings and the fleet management that we have under our remit and our scope at the moment. And we're very much feeding into the sustainability strategy that Irish Water has laid out. That's been driven both by our executive board in terms of setting out ambitious targets, but also by a number of key targets that are being set down by the likes of the Environmental Protection Agency, Sustainable Energy Authority, and indeed the Department of Climate Change. So we have a very good path to the next 10, 20 and 30 years looking at sustainability and what it means to us and what it actually means in terms of Ireland as well, and how we grow. So in the facility space, we're looking at, enhancing our real estate in terms of its green credentials. We're looking at migrating away from carbon-based fossil fuels and decarbonising both our fleet and our buildings over the next number of years in order to meet those targets in the net zero carbon over the next number of years, which align then to, I suppose, the overall government strategy in Ireland at the moment. So there's a number of things that we're doing in each of this space, and happy to discuss that as we go through.
Okay, that's great. No, thanks, Dermot, for that. So if I bring Dennis, you're a service provider into this, I suppose, what are you seeing? Where do you think sustainability is sitting, and how are you seeing that playing out now post-pandemic?
Well, I suppose the role of the service provider, I guess, is to identify with the client what their sustainability goals are. And that's where they would have an in-house program, if you like, to develop that and to work with them on delivering that. And if they don't have one, to develop one with them and encourage them to develop one and move forward. I mean, the key thing that we're seeing is people are, yet again, but for cost reasons more than for sustainability reasons, they want to have the minimal impact on resources, minimal impact on the environment through the use of resources. And that's where we come into the fore in terms of being able to give good advice on that.
Okay, and if we go, Kieran, in terms of in the real estate side, where you're looking at it and you're on the ground and you've got that, I suppose, multi-client perspective from a real estate perspective, what does it mean for Knight Frank and for, say, what you're laying out and doing for your real estate in Ballsbridge?
Well, particularly, I suppose our goal here in Knight Frank is to drive the objectives of our client here, which will be Patrizia, German landlords, and they have it's linking in with their corporate drive for their investment policies to lift sustainability and reduce the environmental footprint of all the buildings they have. So we're trying to develop that through all the areas. So we're doing waste, water, energy, the environmental bits and pieces of the beehives and stuff like that. But I suppose fundamentally it's coming from our landlord's desire or our client's desire to see sustainability move up the agenda.
Okay, and Stuart, on that again, what are you seeing and where do you see sustainability sitting within the FM industry going forward?
It's becoming far more front and center for our clients. and for the way that we provide our services, where we look at capital plant replacements, etc. We have an absolute desire now to find the best fit and the most environmentally sound product. And on the other side, we're working with developers, clients, property managers, and landlords to help them meet their goals as well. That they are coming to us looking for solutions now as well, which is not just on plant, but also on the building automation and monitoring side. And that's led us towards a kind of a whole life cycle approach, where we recommend products as well. So it's not just the initial reduction as well, it's the type of product, how long will it last, what kind of manufacturing processes have gone onto it, etc. So there's absolutely no question that the drivers are now starting to appear. But you had asked about challenges, and one of those is moving those drivers from the guidelines, if you like, onto things that people are having to do. And we're seeing a movement towards that now. We're seeing legislation, we're seeing standards, and we're seeing investors demand change.
Okay, so again, thanks to that for the introduction in terms of where you currently are, and I suppose one of the things that's common there that Ollie you touched on was about the corporate goals and that drive, it's goals and objectives, and if you go back to the Paris Climate Accord and how that's cascaded down into legislation, we're certainly being set a roadmap of where we should be, but I'd have concerns, like as in it's a 2050 roadmap, so very easy to put something on 2050, like as in that's the next generation. I'll be well in a rocking chair at that stage, all going well with a pipe and sitting back enjoying it and not doing these webinars anymore. Surely the responsibility should come on our shoulders and our responsibility quicker and earlier in terms of making that change. So within those, I suppose, objectives being laid down, the corporate policies, what's your perspective? Do you think that's been aggressive enough, or is that being taken at too moderate a pace? Dermot, do you want to come in terms of, I suppose, you're on the client, again, you're a public body, so these are probably rolled out a little bit quicker to you than it would be maybe in the private sector, but in terms of they're coming, you mentioned they're coming, but is the pace coming quickly enough?
In certain aspects, it's actually coming faster than we actually can anticipate. So if I can take it looking at, say, our mobile fleet at the moment, where we've nearly 1,000 vehicles, we're being asked to transform our national fleet supporting water services to low emission vehicles. Currently, the market isn't there. The market has been set quite a hefty target as well. So, there's that meeting of minds where we have the targets for the manufacturers and we've targets for ourselves, and we will meet. There's a gap there at the moment, but we will meet it. So that's one example. Another example is that we have to increase the efficiency of our building stock and decarbonize as well. Some technologies are in their infancy. They're not readily deployable at the moment. They're quite costly. So there is kind of a line of sight there, but it is going to be quite aggressive to implement that technology and to actually do it in a cost-effective manner. And as more people adopt it, it will become more cost-effective. So I think the early adopters will kind of set the pace for an awful lot of people. But the public sector target that we're looking at the moment is going to be managed and measured every year. And it's going to be publicly available through the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So we have to show improvement. We're going to have to show leadership from the front as well. So while there may be gaps in terms of what we can achieve, we still have to work along that roadmap. So, are some of them aggressive? Some of them are overly aggressive, in my opinion, but, we will get there. It's 10, 20 years is a long time. Absolutely, I can hear what you say, but we have to do it for the next generation as well. We can't sit in our laurels and say, that's not our problem. I think an awful lot of that has changed in the mindset of people with, some recent reports come out from, from the COP, the climate agreement and so on and so forth that you mentioned. So there is more of an onus about what we're doing for the next generation. So we have that onus and we have that responsibility.
Okay, and again, it varies. Like as in, I know I was reading a report last week, and it said that 79% say of companies now had sustainability on their agenda with something, but on that only 33% had it locked in, and only 8% actually had plans in place for implementation. So, again, Dennis, from your perspective, especially when we move into the private organizations, are you seeing that aggressive change? Or again, do you think there's any driver? Is it a case of that's fine, public service organizations are being forced into it, but private organizations actually are sitting on their hands at the moment?
Clients come in all shapes and sizes. So, for clients that have an in-house technical capability, that have invested in that, they are definitely pushing forward. And we're lucky enough to work with some of them. And they are moving towards zero carbon buildings as quickly as they can. And they have the ability and the wherewithal, I suppose, and the authority to make investments that will result in that. Dermot mentioned one thing there about mindsets, and that's just something I think that legislation isn't sufficient. It doesn't change behaviours, I find, enough. For instance, if you go back to the plastic bag levy, when that came in, I can't remember when it came in originally, but it was, whatever it was, 5 cents. Now it's 22 cents. That goes back to the government. But retail outlets charge anywhere up to 50 to 70 cents for a plastic bag. And it's almost become part of your spend in a shop that you buy a bag. It hasn't changed buyer behavior to the extent that we would want. And all it's resulted in is just a different revenue stream for retailers. And a 22 cent, of which 22 cents goes back to the government. So I think we absolutely have to have a bigger conversation about social conscience and how organizations as a whole have to drive that in-house and externally of their business as well. We used to hear quite an awful lot about corporate social responsibility. In fact, it was almost no matter what size FM provider you were, you had to have CSR case studies to be considered able to play at the big table, both against our competition and also with our potential clients. We don't see that being asked anymore. We're asked about our sustainability, what we do in terms of the environment, our standards for environmental compliance, our auditing processes, all that kind of stuff. But we don't hear anything about corporate social governance. Well, sorry, I won't say we don't hear anything. We don't hear as much about it as we used to, which is a surprise.
Okay, and again, I suppose, is that because it's the industry we're in? Like, as in, let's call a spade a spade. We're on a cycle where we have service providers, clients. It's a 3 to 5 year procurement cycle on probably 80% of the stock in Ireland in terms of housing and campuses and commercial offices. And that's the reality that, again, there are real estate and landlord organizations that are there, and their primary goal is the financial return on an investment, and they just need it maintained by a facilities management company. So again, where should this responsibility lie? Should it be client organization, or should it be the service provider that's delivering that service? And Stuart, what's your take on that in terms of, again, is it quick enough in terms of the target? Is 2050, 7% per annum too slow? And into the organization then, where does the drive need to come from? Is it the clients or is it the service provider? So again, you're in a service provider, you're obviously trying to sell a product in there, but at the same time, bigger picture, sustainability, this world will not be here in 100 years' time in the same way as it is today, unless we do something in this generation now.
No, and look, not to fudge the answer, it has to come from everyone. It has to come from all sides. As I said previously, I think, and Dennis's point about CSR is well made. We're now hearing a lot more talk, though, from publicly listed companies about ESG. So that governance now falls in under that, and I believe in the pipeline is a scoring matrix to allow investors to score big companies on their ESG compliance and the environmental soundness of their policies. And the implementation of that. They won't be permitted to greenwash anymore. But of course, there's an onus on the supply side and the expertise that we have around the table here today to be going to their customers with sustainable solutions as well. Okay. So there has to be a meeting of minds somewhere. It can't be one-way traffic, and we can't afford, unfortunately, to outsource the responsibility for everything back to the government and legislators. There has to be more than that.
Okay, so we're getting in, I suppose, to some of the challenges here. So Kieran, I know we were talking last week, and you were talking about some of the challenges in terms of, you know, you've done a huge amount of good work, and you might give me one or two examples of what you're doing. But again, what are the barriers to rolling out some of the implementation? So, you know, we were talking about some of the cost challenges that were there last week for you in terms of going on this sustainable journey. Can you take me through where those are?
Well, okay, like here at the Oval, we've put in a water harvesting system. We've installed our beehives to the building. We are looking for zero waste to landfill facilities. We've swapped out lever taps for automatic taps to try and reduce the amount of water. But if you look at it from, let's say we split the thing into two separate entities. One, you have got the government organizations, and you've got the large multinationals who are either being forced or by their own willingness want to drive this forward. But we have to understand that at least 50%, if not more, are small and medium businesses. So, for example, in this bill here in the Oval, I've got 14 small separate tenants, and sustainability has to be something that they can buy into as well. And there's no point. Yeah, we can all have, and what Dermot's doing in Irish Water is great with all the going for electric vehicles, but how does that then relate to a small company with maybe 50 people in it, and you're trying to bring forward recycling and waste control and LED lighting within that building when their issues are we're driving towards the bottom line. And I think, as the lads have said, it's got to be it's right across the board. But I think we're focusing too much at the moment on the stick and not on the carrot. Nobody is getting rewarded for doing what they should do, but everybody is getting penalized for not doing it, as we see. And I think one of you guys said there, look, you can turn around and make the carbon tax twice of what it is at the moment, but that won't change the mentality of the people. They'll go to the pumps and they'll just pay the extra 30 or 50 or 70 cents to cover that. They won't change what they're doing.
So on that basis, guys, like, as in, you know, if there's a cost to change, like, as in, we're not going to go from current state to future state without some change program, and within that there's always a cost to change associated with it. So how do we get over this? And I suppose, you know, within large organizations, they may have more of an appetite, or there may be scale that they can leverage to do that, but in smaller organizations they can't. So how do we get beyond that within the industry? And again, in an industry where it's very, you know, low margins in terms of your main contracts, is it something that should sit in FM? And I suppose, let's say, should FM be staying clear of this, going, this is going to be too difficult?
FM, if it doesn't belong in anywhere else, it belongs in FM.
Yeah.
So yeah, sustainability, like everything else, it falls into FM. But this, to me, there's a couple of things that I think that I tend to harp on about in our industry anyway, and that's, you know, the conscience, you know, whether or not there's a conscience to do the right thing. And we tend to work brilliantly with clients that have a clear conscience about doing the right thing. But that takes time and that takes energy in developing that social conscience. And you know, I was reading about this sometime last year, and they were talking about the difference between pride, which is knowing you've done the right thing, and shame, which is knowing you've done the wrong thing. And right now, there doesn't seem to be enough shame, if you like, to bring my Catholic background into this, in doing the wrong thing. It's you know, or not doing the right thing. And there should be, you know, people should be embarrassed if they don't have a composting bin in their office. They should be really, really embarrassed about that. And they're not. You know, people don't see it as an issue. Oh, it's just another bin lift for whoever it is we're working with. But every company in the countryside should have simple, basic recycling, and the vast majority of them don't even have that. So, like, we're talking about big societal change, when the small stuff hasn't been addressed properly at all.
And how do we get there, Dennis, in terms of how do we move the dial on those behaviors? How do we move it? Like, as in, again, is that going back through the type of contracts that are in place, or is that just the bigger conversation and that needs to be had at a societal level? Like, we can only control what we can control within our industry to a certain extent. So what can we do?
There's two things. If you look at other industries, you take, for instance, Engineers Ireland or other associations, they really put an awful lot of effort into education at an earlier age and enhance, if you like, the understanding and appreciation of being an engineer. I'm a qualified engineer. And I don't think we have that in FM, where there's a big push. But I think we can take advantage of how sincere people are, and in the main, about wanting to do the right thing, and we need to convert that into action. And education at an early age about what is required is the best way to do it. I mean, they've shown this in the Scandinavian countries, and we always are able to point to Scandinavia whenever we're talking about societal change, because they are the leaders across every potential metric you can imagine. They are the leaders because they have a significantly high social conscience. And they bought into that. And education at an early age, they reduced the amount of underage alcohol drinking and drug use from 50% down to 3% by introducing education about not so much about the education of misuse of drugs and alcohol, but emphasizing the benefits of exercise and an outdoor lifestyle. And when they did that, they found that people weren't inclined to use alcohol and drugs. So education is basically what I'm trying to say at an earlier age, getting people on board, getting people to believe in it. And I guess, if you like, have a situation where employers are embarrassed when somebody comes into a potential candidate comes in, or candidates, or their existing workforce, saying, well, look, we expect you to be a responsible employer. We expect you to have a proper sustainability policy that you actually live up to and breathe. Because people will believe in that, and people will buy into it. And I think, as it stands, I think there's a significant drive towards it,
Yeah. Stuart, from your point of view, again, where would you lie with that? What's the driver? How can you, I suppose, get that social conscious back in and get it where actually people are coming to you saying, we want to make a change? Help us.
I think there's an interesting spectrum of views even on the call here, and to be provocative, we've got talk of we need more carrot, less stick. Dennis has brought Catholicism and shame to the table, and education at a younger age, and I would note that the panel, with respect to everyone, is of a certain age as well. But I think it's a point well made about education. It really is, because I think a lot of what I'm hearing on the call here, and a lot of what we'd like to see, is behavioural change. I think the problem is trying to agree on what is going to drive that behavioural change. And surely it has to be a whole spectrum of tools as well. It can't just be one thing. It can't be shaming people into doing it. That may be part of it. But the education is a big part. I think you have to incentivise it. And at the minute, again, some really good points made here about actually you need to make the price of incentivisation, tenable for companies of all ranges. So it's going to be a mixed toolkit of things. But actually, the message that I really liked was it's people doing the right thing. And actually, that's incumbent on all of us, whether we're buyers or sellers of those services or products, actually agreeing on what the right thing to do is, and actually investing in doing that right thing instead of just talking about it, instead of undercutting our neighbour just to make a fast buck. And in our industry, let's be honest, we've been really poor at that. We drive margins to the bottom. We do things that are probably not right, are not correct, are not sustainable. We recommend things based on price in order to stay in business that we shouldn't be doing. So I think the FM industry as a whole has got a pretty poor record on this as commercial enterprises. But, how many of us have explained that to our customers at length? How many of us are able to do that where we have,
2-year contracts.
Yeah.
Open question.
Yeah, and again, as I said, this is the challenge of the industry that we're in. So, ultimately, like as in, the industry is set up where it's dog eat dog, compete on a cycle, and try and win. And one of the challenges, I suppose, that I see over the last 5, 10, 15 years is it has pushed the industry, I suppose, to two different types of players. Whereas before there would have been a lot of smaller service providers, maybe more technical, more soft, but you now have the more conglomerated solutions where it's a managed service potentially, and it's an integrator between a specialist skill set and a client. So basically a client said, I want someone to manage this for me, it's a headache, can someone take it off me? And someone goes in at that level and they provide the management services. Or then you've got the others that said, actually, rather than going that way, we can be a little bit, I suppose, lower cost, because we go and we eliminate margin on margin and we self-perform. So we'll go and we'll deliver the service in. But with that, because you've had to then take on the full remit of FM, you suddenly become, I suppose, the expert in cleaning, catering, technical solutions, pest control, landlord issues, your fleet management. And FM companies then over a period of time have become, I suppose, masters of every service, but not necessarily the experts in any. And within sustainability, do we need experts to drive this? And do we need a change in the industry where we actually say the current structure in the industry of, I suppose, managed service solutions is the wrong one if we're going to do it? We should be actually moving back to technically driven organizations that are specifically responsible for carbon reduction. So if I was to set up a business tomorrow and I said, actually, our mission statement is reduce carbon within FM organizations, not to deliver catering services, cleaning, maintenance, that's my service provision. Would that be something as a disruptor within the industry that would actually work? Because you could potentially then bring the technical skill set to deliver that, and probably, differentiate yourself enough to say it's a separate service line now and it's not in the same. Karen, I'll go to you. You've got multiple, clients. There's different types of models going into it. Is it, as an industry, does the industry need to say, actually, this consolidated solution, managed service solution, isn't the way forward? And actually, we should be splitting it back out a bit, and we should be going, actually, FM should have dedicated sections focused specifically on sustainability and have the expertise, but also have an understanding there's a different price point, a different commercial model that maybe needs to run with that, compared to your technical maintenance contracts, your fleet management contracts, your waste management, or your soft services, catering, cleaning.
If I say yes, Dennis and Stuart are going to kill me. No,
well,
I don't
not necessarily.
I don't think so. I think one of the challenges we've had within the industry is that the professional facilities manager has been head counted out of a lot of organizations, and the multi-silo provider has actually come in and saying, well, we can do that business and we can do that. Any organization worth their salt should and needs to have somebody at a senior level who is responsible for FM. It is the second, next to staff, it's the second biggest cost center in any business. But too often the contracts are driven by the finance director or the HR director or somebody else in it, and they, to be brutal, they have very little interest in making sure that the FM contract is delivering a sustainable solution. All they want is, this is a headache. I don't quite understand it. I'm not into cleaning. I'm not into maintenance. I don't know anything about equipment. I just want to give that to somebody who can turn around and deal with it for me. And until we get back to the sense where we do have professional facilities managers who should be leveraging on the last 2 years and the fact that we have stepped up immensely and delivered on all of the challenges that COVID has presented to us, and we use that to turn around and lift our profiles within the organizations so that we do get the board listening to us, and maybe given before our star wanes again, and we lose the opportunity.
Okay, so Dennis, one of the solutions there Kieran's talking about is we need FMs back in client organizations. We need some level of expertise back in. So again, do you think that is a direction that the clients need to actually strengthen, so that there's an enabler within the organization to allow the FMs, and again, going into the direct provision or the full solution? What's your take? Do you think that we should be actually saying sustainability is deception, but it's a solution in itself, and we shouldn't be trying to integrate it?
It depends on the size of the organization, right? So some companies can afford and would need, because of their portfolio size, to have an in-house director of FM or real estate, who can then, provided they have the sufficient expertise and qualifications, can then set out an appropriate contract in place for an FM service provider to work alongside them, to give to provide what they need and to deliver the goals. Curious enough, one of the questions you asked there was, is there a disruptor in the market for a carbon consultancy to come in to give advice? They already exist, and actually, Stuart, you might know this, but Cyrus and Weston and another company who provide their energy consultants, if you like. We worked together on a project back in 2014/15 to bring some level of control back to a naturally ventilated building. So they already exist, those organizations. We don't tend to come across them very often. And what we do tend to see now is that FM companies, to show the added advantage, the added services that they bring, is that they would have or try to have that level of competency in-house. And you used a phrase, Bernard, earlier on about, you said masters of all trades, but not really, and I think that's 100% correct. Most large FM companies, have an origin in either hard services or soft services. And the really, really large ones tend to have a background in soft services, because that's where where the sheer large volume of staff typically lies. And they don't have the technical expertise in-house to deliver the kind of projects. And that's why there's a room for someone like Cyrus and other companies that we work alongside as well, to provide that technical expertise. And of course, you have your mechanical and electrical consultants who also do that. But the construction industry has sucked so much technical know-how out of the FM industry. It's just not funny. And there's an absolute lack of ready, available technical expertise in the FM industry at the moment.
Yeah, and again, I'd see that regularly across the board at the moment. And again, because, we were talking about this in terms of, building service engineers used to be a trade. It's not, like, as in fairness, Portobello is the first that has a degree program, a master's program running in FM in Ireland, which is great and adding to it. But again, if you look at someone like, I was in Johnson Controls for years, again, the background was technical and it went into it. So again, I think there was a lot of technical FM service providers. But again, over years, I think they've been whittled down to a certain extent. And yeah, there's a certain amount built in, but the challenge again is within, organizations. How do you pay for that headcount in an FM organization if it's not dedicated to an actual client cost? So, when I was bidding for work in large contracts, you're pricing your organization for that contract, and you're trying to get enough so that you can build, an overhead team and extra support services. But it's very tight. It's very hard to do that. And it's very hard to make that sustainable because, again, it's an operational solution. Whereas a lot of the time, I think with sustainability, and the challenge there is they're one-off. It's more of a project solution because, you're not going to go and make infrastructural utilities changes every day on the same client. You're going to have to move around. So you need to probably resource that differently to the way you would resource a model of an FM service provider that's, a day in, day out contract, and you're dealing with the daily challenges rather than, I suppose, the project type challenges you have.
Can you jump in there? Do you mind if I jump in? See, that's I think is the opposite to sustainability, if you don't mind me being so blunt. Yeah. Because the project teams come in and they set things up in a particular way. And this is the difference between construction and maintenance that I've been singing about for the 20 years I'm in the industry, is, it's not always set up to run the most efficiently from a maintenance perspective. It'll be set up to run, not to fail. And And that's not efficient typically. You'll have systems, because you'll have the mechanical, somebody who's come in and set in the water pumps, or whatever, and then you have the BMS control systems, and your ventilation systems, and they could all be fighting against each other when you've got multiple contractors, who are setting it up to run its own independent system optimally, as opposed to when someone like an efficient maintainer like Weston or whoever else should come in. They should be looking to how can we run the combined systems optimally. And that's what a proper maintenance contract should be. That's what, we don't see them so much anymore, but there used to be an emphasis on in procurement contracts for energy reduction, that over the lifetime of the contract you would reduce the energy consumption by X, Y, or Z. And again, we don't see that. We don't see those coming out, and it's not because the low hanging fruit is gone, and they don't see the opportunity. It's just not on their radar.
So is that partly, again, back to what Kieran was saying, is you've had a lot of, I suppose, the expertise within client organization has diminished over time. FM has moved into, different sections within the business, is more of a cost centered and value creation. And that therefore there isn't the expertise at a higher level to start say there's opportunities here and this is how we would get to achieve sustainability, and we need to have the right people. Dermot, I'll bring you in, again, from the client perspective, have you seen that change? And I know you've a strong in-house, but I suppose from your experience looking at the broader industry, and I suppose, and I'll ask you to talk collectively in relation to clients here, is there something that clients need to do to enable that to happen, so that actually the services that are available through Stuart or through Dennis actually can be brought to play to make a difference?
I think you're spot on. I think at the moment is that you need somebody to realize, what does sustainability mean to the actual company? What are they trying to achieve? And then there's an absolute fit for facilities management service providers and management companies to come in and actually provide that service. Now, as you clearly called out there, you're not going to get something for free unless it's earmarked and circled. It's not going to happen. Like the contracts before, where facilities management company or provider were brought in to manage a plant or a building or whatever it is, and to deliver energy savings, that is kind of disappeared. And maybe it's in a transition period where companies have now that mandate to take on directly themselves, and it might be somebody's responsibility. Do they have the technical expertise? They may or may not. So I think the onus is on the company to understand what they want to do in relation to sustainability first and foremost, get a baseline and identify where they need to go. And we're very much focused here on kind of energy and carbon. Sustainability is around kind of the three pillars of social, economic, and environmental. We're talking about environmental. The economic bit here that we have to talk about is that facilities management providers can bring an awful lot of expertise to bear. They can help improve companies' performances, whether it be in the area directly of facilities management or kind of more kind of broader things in terms of maybe stationery, front of house, catering, waste management, whatever it is, or even improving their greener credentials and portraying it as a more socially inclusive company. So Kieran mentioned there around green roofs and beehives and so on and so forth. And there's a number of companies doing that at the moment. I think facilities management companies and providers are in a great place to provide that service, but sometimes clients are just unaware of who to go to, and they're maybe searching around for it. They don't understand that in the toolkit of facilities managers, they have a network of people. They have done things for previous clients. So I think once they understand what's required from a sustainability point of view, they can earmark it from a cost perspective that aligns to their own business plans and strategies. Then it doesn't become a kind of this is a one-off service. This becomes the facilities management company now is ingrained in delivering sustainability directly into the fabric of that company. And once that happens, the conversation then becomes a little easier. It's just not a transaction in terms of, I want you to do this for this much money. I don't have the budget, therefore it stops. Or as we were talking about earlier, that you used to have companies that were, from a facilities perspective, delivering year-on-year energy savings. If you go back and look, has those energy savings been maintained? There needs to be somebody on the client side to manage that as well, or there needs to be that link to the facilities management company that is telling the client how they're still performing, and what else they can do from maybe going from 20, 30, 40, 50% energy reduction or carbon reduction. What's the next step? What is the next move? And how does that feed into their sustainability plan?
But again, so does that have to be where the client step forward to a certain extent and say, we're going to pay for that expertise in the service providers company, so that when we're going to market to an RFP, we're going to allow that there's a percentage of the costs of the contract that's allocated to supporting the sustainability of the contract and of the services and their provision? Because again, I suppose the FM companies can't put that headcount in to do it unless they can recover the cost of it to deliver that service.
That's absolutely spot on. Like, facilities management as an industry, they're doers. They're enablers. They can help make things done, but they can't do things for free. It's as simple economics as that. There has to be a business case to do it. And unless the client company puts their hands up to realize that, yes, we need to do this for the sustainability point of view for the future generations and so on and so forth, or there's other drivers such as the circular economy, environmental indicators, or whatever it is, it might be community engagement and so on and so forth. Once they know that, they will then realize that it's not going to happen for free. It's not going to happen automatically. You have to ring fence a person or a provider to actually provide that service to you. That's the part where it comes back in the client to be brave enough to say, if I want to be more sustainable, what is sustainability for me and my organization, and what do I need to improve, or what do I need to do in order to improve that? And there's a number of different mechanisms now that I suppose are forcing clients or customers to actually engage in that, whether it be voluntary, whether it be coming from the government, the EU, or wherever. Things like non-financial reporting that you have to do now as a rule for large organizations. I think Stuart says there, you're able to benchmark different organizations and where they are. So from an FM point of view, you can go in and you can say, I can see where you are in terms of your sustainability scale. I can help you improve upon this. I have helped other clients and customers. That's where there's an opportunity maybe for the facilities management sector to come in and actually deliver value add, and again, diversify, I suppose, what they're delivering to clients.
So with that, like, as in, I suppose one of the challenges we're saying, there's an opportunity there. There's obviously the power of the supply chain within the FM organizations to do it. And I know, John, we talked about that's part of the benefit of having, the FM, is that they can bring the expert with them, even if it's if they don't have it internally in their own organization. But I suppose, how do we bring that in? Is there a role for standards? If I'm looking at the new, say, ISO standard in FM, or if looking at ISO 50001, does there need to be something there that says organization of a certain size have to meet these criteria, which allows basically, I suppose, the door to be open for FM companies to come in and justify and say, we'll deliver it for you, but you're putting some onus and some pressure on the actual client organizations to be held accountable to a certain standard? Because at the moment, a lot of those are still optional, especially from the private sector. Public sector, large organizations certainly are being mandated, but the rest of the industry hasn't been mandated to a certain extent. So is that the way to go, is to put a corral around and say you have to meet these standards? Because that will mean that clients have to open their doors and bring in the expertise, and that's where FM can come in and I suppose ride in their white horse and save the day.
Yeah, so there is that, as again, meeting of the minds where, there's going to have to be that legislation, there's going to have to be that target, that onus that's put on those client organizations. And then it's the opportunity for the FM company to say, I can help you deliver that. There's going to be a cost involved, but this is how I'm going to do it for you. So whether it be around waste management, whether it be around cost in terms of affecting their bottom line and making them more profitable, or it could be simply about decarbonizing or reducing their energy efficiency in order to meet maybe a government target, their own internal corporate target, or whatever it is. It's understanding where it best fits. And like for smaller organizations, I definitely heard that earlier, it is a harder struggle. The larger organizations, it's maybe a bit easier because you can bring more cost to bear, and then there's the operations, the scale is different. So it is harder for the smaller clients, maybe the smaller FM providers, to deliver on that scale. But there's still an opportunity there, and sustainability is something that's going to grow more and more over the next number of years. It's not something that's going to, it's not going to something that's going to stop maybe at the end of 2030. This is going to continue on. So I think we need to embrace it. You mentioned there about the different ISO standards, like 50001 being the energy management one, 41,001 being the facilities management standard. Like, there is a big opportunity there, say, for example, around the energy audit scheme and the compliance that must be met for companies around completing energy audits on a regular basis, or indeed to have ISO 50001. That's something that the facilities management company could help provide. And as the opportunities are identified and the business case is developed, actually install those changes, ensure that they're hard fixed, and again delivering consistent savings. So, you know, it was mentioned earlier about, you know, that, you know, that used to be there years gone by. Are those savings still being maintained? Is there another opportunity to go in, recommission, you know, those systems again, which wouldn't be a massive cost to deliver what would be a significant saving? Can that money then be repurposed to deliver more on their sustainability agenda? But that's the opportunity I think the facilities management companies and service providers have, is that if you can ring fence maybe that, they won't call it profit, but that saving to do more and continue on in that vein. And, you know, I think there's a great opportunity there.
Yeah, and again, I'd agree with you. And I was involved in an energy as a service solution a couple of years ago for a large multinational, and like I say, it was a powerful solution in terms of the cost and the benefits it brought. But a very hard sell to actually get it across the line, because again, not everyone understands it and they're wary of it. It probably took the length of the project to actually convince procurement was the right thing to do, and then with the project actually took less time than the convincing. So Stuart, again, you're in this and trying to get that across and looking at it like what Dermot's outlined there is, yeah, there is a desire. This is going to be an opportunity going forward. You know, standards will help, but ultimately, you know, we have to be creative in our solutions, and then if you are creative, you'll get the reward in terms of service provider. So, what's your take? Do you think there's enough, or do you think that there needs to be, you know, some governance put on that actually forces clients a little bit to include this in their RFPs and in their
I think that was kind of perhaps where the argument was going this afternoon, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dermot, and Dennis and Kieran as well. But I mean, a little bit of what I'm hearing here is, and I think this is actually what's going to change, is people are going to have to be compelled at some level, and because otherwise they simply won't toss the costs. They will still continue to take the easy route. That behavioural change won't happen. And I'm not sure I can say much more than that on it, to be honest with you, Bernard. But I really feel there has to be something very compelling to actually drive widespread change. And some of that is going to have to be regulation.
So do we as an industry, in terms of service providers, you know, do we need to lobby government? Do we need to be banging on Eamon Ryan's door going, if you're serious about this, you know, there's no point in pumping loads of money into sicking, like as a, you know, some, you know, white elephant down in Money Point that'll, you know, harvest hydrogen from natural gas and you'll get blue hydrogen. And, you know, the real effort should be going into actually mandating that every building has a certain standard and that there is a savings glide path associated with its energy, and that each building must, you know, be reducing its footprint 10% year on year, whether that's energy or whether that's carbon, to actually mandate it down. And should the industry be lobbying?
Well, can I pop in there?
Yeah.
I think Stuart's absolutely right. I think the process has to be started with some form of legislation or some form of mandated requirement. But we would hope that once that gets up and running, that the benefits that are seen from that are then companies become aware, oh, by the way, Joe, I know we have to do this, but by the way, there's a benefit there that we didn't recognize. And I suppose if you look at Ireland as a whole, let's take the smoking ban, for example. We went crazy. Why are you doing this? But yet, once it was brought in, there was the degree of compliance went up and up and up and up. And now it's almost to a stage where if you're a smoker, we don't want you anywhere near the place. Yeah. And that's a mindset change that only took 10 years to bring about.
I have a funny thing about the smoking ban, if you don't mind me digressing. driving through a small country village at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was great to see people complying with the no smoking because they were smoking outside the pub at 2 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, the fact that you can't drink after 11:30 didn't matter. So, so that's the thing about old rules and new rules. I think you're 100% right here on the adoption or the compliance with the no smoking was extraordinary here and totally caught people by surprise. But again, I think we are in a unique place in time right now for FM to be able to deliver significant strategic change because of COVID, because of pandemic. And that was I think how you addressed it.
Yeah.
Your very, very first question to me, Bernard, was how are we going to do it now post-pandemic? A lot of clients are completely changing their layouts of their buildings, and they're listening carefully to the now proven science that open plan offices do not result in a high level of productivity, and they certainly do not result in a high level of employee satisfaction and comfort. So clients are actually spending quite a lot of money, or has it been forced into it in a lot of cases, in changing the shape and look of their buildings. And right now is the ideal time to be pushing the sustainability agenda while we're doing that.
Yeah, and again, certainly, I think that's been one of the big, I suppose, sea changes in the last 12 to 18 months is the role of the individual within the organization and what their expectations are. Because every organization basically said, well, we have employees and they all come to our office and they work and then they go home and we're not worried about it after that. And there was the odd person said, can I do some remote working? And they were looked like with evil eyes, going like, I say, you're probably not working, you're just going golf and walking the dog. But all that's changed now, and employees have now said, actually, we want and we have levels of expectations around our work environment, our work-life balance, but also around sustainability, around, I suppose, the impact that organization is having. So is that, like we talked about the requirement for like a compelling client organizations to go on this journey. Is that actually where the pressure is going to come from? Is it going to be the employees? Is it going to be the HR that you can't hire people? Because employees will actually start to say, well, I don't want to work for you unless you can show me that you've got a commitment to the environment. And again, is that maybe the door that FM should be banging on in terms of putting it out there? Is your corporation, is your organization, delivering on the environment? Is it delivering on sustainability? To drive that people become, I suppose, more aware of it and then start demanding it from the client organization that then will ask the actual service providers to deliver that service.
I think it's another area to pressure organisations on, and this is probably a once in a generation opportunity for that, because employees will be able to benchmark those organisations using the tools that we've talked about. And a lot of younger employees, much younger than me and most of the people on the call, will choose to work in places who actually do work in a sustainable manner, who do meet their sustainable and corporate and governance responsibilities. I think that's, again, it's another tool that is going to be brought to bear in the fight.
Okay. So guys, we've got a minute or two left before we wind up. So I just want to go around, I suppose, your conclusion from your point of view, and specifically, if you had a wish list and you could say, okay, there's two things I'd like to change in the industry, that ultimately, if we're looking back at this video in 10 years time, 15 years time, we'll go, God, if those things were done, we actually stopped climate change. We've stopped, fires raging in Australia and America. We've stopped global warming. We've stopped the ice caps. Galway isn't flooded along with Dublin. I suppose, what would be the things that you would like to see or would like to change to try and address that? Kieran, we'll start with you.
Thank you.
I'm just writing here for notes now.
What I would like to see is the fact is that this facilities management as an organization, as a group of individuals, as a group of professional individuals, step forward now and use whatever influence that they have gained to become a more positive driving force within their own organizations and push that. Don't allow us to fall back to where we were just an extra thought, but now we're up at the forefront. If we could get to be that, I think Dennis said it earlier at the very beginning. He said, facility seems to be the area where everything that nobody else wants gets dumped into. Well, we need to take control of the big decision makings going forward. Our energy usage, our sustainability, our environmental, our recycling, and drive that forward with whatever champions we can within the organizations.
Okay. Dennis, I go to you next.
Okay, I mean, it's a huge question, Bernard, you know. I suppose, and I was thinking, coming into this, I was thinking, you know, today is a good day. You know, obviously we've you know, it's climate action week. Climate action has been going on for a while now, so it's a good week to be having this conversation. But I really think education and societal change is what's needed, and they will result and can result in fairly quick turnaround in terms of behaviors. We absolutely have to have more societal change in relation to consumption of resources. You know, Dermot mentioned earlier on, we need to really focus on one pillar of sustainability, and the social and economic side of things, which, you know, curious enough, because of the well-being side of Weston, it's a huge part of it. And there's an awful lot more that needs to be done on the social and economic side of it to be able to have a fully sustainable, cohesive, sustainable strategy for the country. And we're not doing enough as a country. We scored on the bottom of the top 15 countries in the recent SDG surveys. You know, we did well in economics, we did well on the GDP per person, but we did very, very poorly on poverty and social equality. We did really poorly on all of those. So there's a much bigger conversation to be had about sustainability rather than just the FM side, but it has a huge impact on the FM side.
Okay, Stuart.
I mean, just to try and refine what was a very big question down to FM, I think number one is probably the problem that our industry has always had, which is demonstrating ourselves to be a value to an organisation rather than a cost. And that's for us to do that. And I am going to steal Dennis's other one, I'm afraid, which is education. I think the more we educate people, the more likely they are to fall on the right side of the argument more often than not.
Okay. And Dermot?
I think twofold again, and I'll kind of keep it on the facility side. I suppose the facilities management providers to actually help companies identify what is sustainability for that organization and then help them develop a roadmap. I would love to look back in 5 or 6 years' time to see kind of a step change where the facilities management as an entity, you know, took hold of the opportunity that was sustainability and became one of the flag bearers of improvement for organizations and for the industry as a whole.
Okay, so again, if I take that, the key part is, and again, Kieran and Dermot, it's ownership. It's stepping forward now that there's an opportunity and actually embracing it. And it's educating, it's bringing people, it's communication. You know, we've a responsibility, I suppose, to roll this out and to be the providers and to explain the benefits and the absolute value in bringing sustainability into FM. But then we need to own it and deliver it. So it needs to be actioned, again, with that social responsibility that you're talking about, Dennis. That, you know, we have to have the level of integrity, and we have to actually say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to stick to our guns, and we're going to do it the right way, and call that out within the industry. Again, you know, I'm not necessarily going shaming, but we have to set ourselves up that actually we provide it, and we'll shine a light on where it's been done well, and we'll shine a light on where it isn't been done well, and we'll explain and communicate what the right journey is. And I think that's the challenge we have in the industry, is to be able to take that ownership now that we're at the top table, or to try and make sure that we stay at that top table. So guys, I really appreciate you joining me here today. I think that's been a great conversation. This is the first of 3 webinars we're doing on sustainability. So next month, we're going to look more at the technology. We didn't get into it today, but for me, the journey to go and actually make the changes, we're going to have to bring technology into it. How do we measure so that you can make changes? Because if you're not measuring it, you can't make changes. And how do you make sure then you know that you're reducing year on year and doing that well? Doing the same thing over and over in the same way won't get you there. So there's going to have to be some disruptive technology brought into the workplace to actually get that. And is that going to be hydrogen, electricity? Is that going to be smart buildings? Is that management integrated systems? And how you do that? So we'll cover that. And the last one that we're going to cover, which we'll get to in January after we've all had a good Christmas, all going well, will be on leadership. Because again, we can talk about it, and we know there's policies and legislation there now. We know there's a driver. But if we're going to get FM to actually take ownership, and that's what we're saying, bring communications, education to the industry, we're going to need leadership. We're going to need leaders in the industry that are willing to step forward. So we're going to focus in our 3rd webinar specifically on that leadership challenge. So guys, thanks a million. Really appreciate that. We're going to hop over into the Q&A room now, and we'll be able to continue on any discussion. So looking forward to continuing on there. Okay, thanks guys.
Thank you.